Hi guys, Rory here. Just doing a quick video for you, for any textile students out there stuck in quarantine, to show you how to do some dyeing at home basically. I've written out some short recipes for you. I'll be posting them separately with the video, but that recipe that I've written out for you is for red onion skins. Basically it's just a dye process where you can use mainly household items. However, today, right now, I am going to be showing you doing a turmeric and marigold flower dye bath, because that's all I had floating about the house. So I didn't have loads of onion skins, so maybe you can plan this away. So basically, to start off, there's two parts to this process. The first one, which I think is very important, which is fabric preparation. I've blue peated it and pre-prepped my fabric, but basically what I want you to do is to follow that recipe, and that is to remove all the starch from your fabric. I don't know what fabric you might have lying about the house. It might be some calico, or it might be some old garments that you've cut up, but basically most of the time they won't dye perfectly well because they've not been scoured, meaning that they've got all the starch still on them. So yeah, like I said, I've pre-done that, and then I'm just going to be showing you the actual dye bath bit, which is neither bit's too difficult. It just means having the right ingredients, putting them in a pot, boiling them with your fabric, and then awaiting the outcome. There is so many different ways you can go about doing this. So the recipe that I've written might not fit with all the ingredients that you have, but there's different options here that you can work with to come up with your own dye baths, basically. Right, okay, so I will start with, you're meant to weigh out your dyes and your wet fabric. I think I've got, I don't know, I'm going to do it by eye, but I've written out the weights for you. I've done this before, so I can. But put in some marigold flowers. The dye bath, the colour that I'm aiming for is a nice golden yellow. You can do it just with turmeric if you want, but I wanted to show you how to strain the fabric as well. Strain the dye bath, it's something that's important with the red onion skins, because you're not using a powder like turmeric. You can get turmeric from any household store. This is probably the main ingredient. I'm sure loads of you have it right now because it's really good for the immune system, so I'm sure your mums have got it tucked away somewhere. And then the marigold flowers, I got those on the internet. They're just dried. I think they're from a Eastern European company. So plenty of turmeric. I am doing a calculations in my head that this is 100 grams, so I'm putting in about a third of it along with my 50 grams of marigold flowers. I haven't got that much fabric to dye, so the dye bath doesn't need to be too massive. So then, start. Right, so you want to put in enough water into your dye bath to sort of make sure that your fabric's got enough room to move and be free within the pot, because if it hasn't got enough freedom within the pot, it can mean that not all the dye will penetrate throughout the fabric. I don't know how large your samples will be. Some will be trying to push it, some will be a bit more reserved, but I'm not really pushing it today. But this pot and the amount of water I've actually got in it is adequate for my fabric to be moving about. You can sort of hold it and see, and then so that when I stir it, it's sort of flowing freely within the water and not really getting congealed or being a bit contested for space. Alright, so to start with, I'm just going to bring my dye bath to boil. It's important that you get it to a boil, because that's what then starts to break down the fibres within the flowers or the onion skins or the turmeric, and starts to eke it out into all the boiling water. And then we're going to bring it down after it's been boiling for a few minutes, down to simmer for, in total we're going to have it on there for about an hour. Oh yeah, right, okay, so as part of the fabric preparation bit, there's different ways in which you can prep your fabric. It all involves scouring, it's the same process, but there's different mordants, which is the scouring, preparation, chemical thing. But they come in many different forms. But the three that I found that you could easily find around your house are salt, vinegar and copper pennies. Copper is great for scouring and fabric preparation. I would recommend using more pennies than this, but I'm going to add these into my dye bath just for good luck. It will help the fabric while it's being dyed. But yeah, in the fabric prep, I would use a combination of all three, or just salt and copper pennies. So every now and then I'm just going to give that a little bit of a stir. Make sure it's all doing its little thing. So it's not all just sitting at the top. You want it to all sort of go in and out of the fabric. So one thing to note as well, you want to see if your mum or your dad has got a spare pot, because typically we're not using anything too dangerous at all, but you typically want to keep your dyeing equipment different from your cooking equipment. We're not using anything that can really harm you, but for future safe practice, if you do continue doing more of this, to definitely try and get your own separate pot. This is one of my own pots which I bought for dyeing and such activities. So that are different ingredients for getting different colours, obviously. So I'm using turmeric and marigold flowers to get a nice strong golden yellow. But you can also use pinks. Pinks and purples are quite, you've probably got the most sort of easy ingredients to get hold of to make those. Pink and purple is one of the most numerously occurring colours in nature. So the fact that you can easily get dyes or find ingredients to make dyes for that is quite easy. Examples being avocado skins, beetroots, not the pre-cut beetroots. I've made that mistake before. They've already lost all their colour because they're soaked in vinegar. So you want the ones with the skin on, sort of the raw from the ground beetroot. But beetroots, avocado skins, red onion skins. You can get oranges. Well, I say orange, it might come out a bit of a dirty orange, like a brown, but push it, see what happens, using different mordants as well. So different combinations of salt, vinegar and copper will give you different tones of orange, but you get that from brown onion skins. Blue, hard one to get. Blueberries would be one option, however an expensive option. You'd need quite a few of them. And then we're back at yellow. Those are your sort of main colour groups. Typically the colour that we'll be getting won't be bold, strong like your chemical dyes, but this is one that I've done in the past for my degree course. This is the same dye bath as I'm doing now, and this is the colour that came out unwashed, unhindered, just left on its own to be, and then the other ones are examples of me washing them at different stages, or the length of time that I had left it in the dye bath for. So I believe this was probably in the dye bath for about an hour, whereas this one was only in there for about 15 minutes. See the difference? And then this is the difference between washing it. So that's just washing it with water, and that's washing it with soap. Yeah. So like you can really see the different strength and hue as you go around. I would recommend just leaving it and getting the strongest possible colour. Depends what you want. Everyone's different. We all have our different projects, but a nice vibrant colour is obviously what most people would like. So another thing that I'm going to be showing you how to do is fabric manipulation with the dye bath itself. So that means both shibori and dip dyeing is what I'm going to show you. dip dyeing is what it says on the tin, really. You're just going to hold the fabric, dip it in for a certain amount of time, or leave it over the edge and let it do its magic to get some of the fabric to dye and some of it to not dye. Shibori is a more complicated way of getting some of the fabric to dye and some of it to not dye, but it really is not actually that complicated. It's rather simple. All you need, well, the basic concept of it is, before I explain how to do it, is to stop what you're doing. You're constricting the dye, reaching some of the fabric and not. So if my hands were the fabric, imagine that, and I were to clench one bit of it and leave the rest of it floating, not much water would penetrate in between my fist because it's tight and it's tense. But my floaty bit of hand would dye because it's floating about freely within the water, and all the dye is penetrating as much as it likes, especially when I stir it, you know. So that's the basic concept. You can do it in loads of different ways. I'm going to show you some basic, easy ways using just, instead of a bit of wood, you can maybe use a credit card or an old Oyster card or something like that. But just using rubber bands and closed pegs just to cause some areas to be tight and constricted to stop dye penetrating, and then other areas to be floating and free to absorb dye as much as you like, or as much as it likes. Yeah, so always just giving my dye bath a cheeky little stir. So as you can see from my shibori, I've got my bit of fabric, I've wrapped it in a few bits and bobs, a few rubber bands I found lying around the house, and some clothes pegs which I've used in the past for dyeing. You can see some areas are nice and loose and they'll absorb plenty of the colour, whereas some areas where it's been folded over again and where the rubber bands are sitting, the dye won't penetrate. So I'm quite looking forward to actually seeing how this is going to result and become the end of this dye bath. But we're not going to put it in yet. We're going to wait for the dye bath to do its thing over the next hour or so. Let all the lovely dye particles leave their ingredients and sit in the water. One added extra note I would say as well is to use more elastic bands and things to constrict the shibori than me. And if you do some research online, you can see different ways of folding the fabric as well as wrapping string or elastic bands around it, which will give you specific patterns and specific results, other than just the random spray of colour that I've achieved. So yeah, show you what it's looking like. It's looking nice and yellow. Turmeric is particularly potent. Marigold flowers are quite good as well. But that red onion skins, and onion skins may not necessarily look that potent at that stage, but it will be fine. I have messed up. This was my onion skin in the past, but that doesn't necessarily mean that would be your onion skin dye bath. I think I used white skins for that. It didn't really work, it came out very grey, so I would recommend using as many onion skins as you can. Typically you mainly use about half the weight of a fabric, so if my fabric weighs 100 grams, then I'd use 50 grams of onion skins, but throw it in as much as you can. If you've got spare beetroot skins or whatever, chuck them into, just because all of these recipes are just, it's like baking a cake. There's so many different ways you can do it, and different mordants and different whatever you want that. You just got to try it and find out. I've done plenty of experiments where they've gone wrong, so if it doesn't go right the first time, just try again. Drop me an email. I will put my email on one of the recipes to contact me directly if you've got any queries or questions. Would this work? I want to try and get this colour, what's the best way of doing it? Is this plausible? Bloody blah blah blah. I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I can. I mean, I'm not really doing too much in quarantine either, so Alright, so now I've had my dye bath on the simmer for the past hour. I am going to strain it to get all the sediment out of the dye bath, so it's just the liquid left. Reason for doing this is because the dye is coming from, say for example, marigold flowers, which are petals and leaves. Say if you stick the recipe and do the red onion skins, the dye is going to be coming from those particular areas. So if you leave them in there with the fabric, they're going to attach onto the fabric, and they're either not going to dye in areas because the liquid can't penetrate fully where those two are touching, or it's going to over penetrate and you're going to get a patchy, not chaotic, but it's going to be difficult to control the patchiness. It's going to be more like organic and kind of annoying. It depends on your outcome, but I would say strain it to get a nice even colour throughout your fabric. So, as said, how hot is this? Yeah, I'm just going to pour it all in. And I'm just going to give my pot a quick rinse out. Alright. And give my... So you can, if you don't want to use your mum's sieve, don't tell mine, you can also use spare fabric you've got. Calico would work great, or cheesecloth is traditionally the right fabric to be using because it's a bit more open to let water out more easily. And doing that will also mean that you can strain your fabric, your pot a bit easier. Oh, it's a bit hot now. Where's my stick? Yeah. I'm just trying to get all of the liquid out. Nice and good. See that? Just patting it through, trying to get all the drips. Make my dye bath as strong as possible. Oh. It is hot though. Right, and that can go to one side for now. Soon I will be retrieving my pennies though. Right then. Oh shit. 3, 2, 1. Having not spilt any of your dye bath in the process of straining it, like I should have done, your dye bath should be ready to take your fabric. Mine currently looks like that. A nice warm yellow colour, almost orangey brown, but that's the colour that we're hoping for. Yeah, should be able to take our fabric. So what I'm going to do is before I put it in the dye bath, I'm going to get my fabric soaking wet so it's sodden all the way through, apart from my shiboris, which I'm going to get slightly wet, not completely. The reason that we're doing this is because for the dye to penetrate your fabric more easily and evenly, having them already sodden with water will mean that the dye will flow through the fibres a lot easier rather than having to penetrate on their own. You see? Okay, so get them soaking wet first. See, the trick with getting your fabric to be totally sodden all the way through is to squeeze it and move it about within the water itself. This is just to squeeze any air bubbles out of the fabric, which may cause patchiness when you're in your dyeing. So I've only got this one slightly wet. I've not really squeezed it too much. I'm just going to plonk that bad boy in. Same with these. Now that they're wet, give them a nice squeeze. Lovely. And then put them in one by one. Ooh, yep, yep. And then this one, I'm just gonna pin to the top as well. And that way we can get a bit of dip dyeing involved as well. Right, so now that your fabric's in, we're going to bring it back to a boil. Roll on. Yeah, right, okay, yeah. So, we're going to bring the fabric back to a boil for about a few minutes, and then we're going to bring it back down to simmer again, just like we did at the start of the dye bath. This is just to help in the same way that we're getting the fibres or the dye out of the flower fibres and the turmeric before. Now we're trying to get it in and then slowly to reinforce it with a slow but long simmer. Another good trick for good measure is I'm going to reuse my copper pot pennies to put into my dye bath just to ensure any extra mordanting, just to help the fabric take on the dye. You never know, got to try everything you can. Right, so I have finished my dye bath and taken my samples out the pot and left them to cool down so I don't burn my fingers. And now I'm just about to reveal my first shibori to see what effect it's caused and how it's influenced my fabric. So, oh, there we go, it's still a bit wet. I would recommend, well, unraveling it and then letting it dry, but mainly to let it dry. Okay, so can you see, it's not particularly great, don't get me wrong. Shibori is not my favourite technique, but can you see in certain areas, like here and here, where there was the elastic bands on the fabric, it stopped the dye from penetrating so much, as did my other little shibori sample. Yeah. You can see we've got quite a strong yellow colour as well, which is quite nice, quite a golden warm yellow. The colour may change and vary a little bit with each, with different fabrics you use and with your ingredients. So I don't know if the warmth of this yellow is coming through from the marigold or from the turmeric. I think the turmeric, but I think the majority of the colour is probably the turmeric. The marigolds are just there to show you that I need to just strain it. But they're still yet to dry, but they should come out. The colour will come out a bit lighter than what we've currently got. This is a synthetic silk, which I put in. It's taken up the colour really well to almost to an orange, but because it's synthetic, one thing, I put this in, if I were to wash this, I think that all the colour would come out because it's not a natural fibre. Yeah, so I reckon this will wash out. I mean, I might even test it now to see. Oh well, to be fair, I do stand corrected. This I could be wrong, this could be a real silk. I found it in my scrap box upstairs. But the colour has stayed, which sort of proves the quality of the dye bath. I imagine it would do the same for these. So you can get, if the colour's too strong, I mean, so washing the colour out straight away or rinsing them straight away after the dye bath will weaken the colour a little bit, but it depends what you want from your dye bath. You might be going for a really soft pale hue instead of a really strong bright colour, but yeah, I'm quite happy with these. I used a selection of fabrics, some scoured, some unscoured, but yeah, like I said, I don't know what fabrics you have access to, so I would recommend doing the first process before the dye bath. Yeah, there you go. Also, another thing which I can talk about is Dylon dyes. If you don't fancy doing all this effort for a dye bath, although it will get you great marks within your course, and it's great to learn because it's making colour out of things you can just find around your house, but there is another option, and that is Dylon dyes. You can buy them as packets off the internet, just like the marigold flowers or other ingredients of arty materials, and there's two types of Dylon dyes. One is a machine wash, so you bang it in your washing machine with your fabric, boom, It's got everything in it. It's got its salt, everything that you need for the fabric to take on the dye. It does need to be prepared though, that fabric, don't get me wrong. You'll get the best results from fabric that's been scoured and doesn't have any of the starch left on it. So that's that little recipe I wrote. But yeah, so dye, you'll bang it in there, let it do its thing, and then take the fabric out and dry it. But one thing you got to do to not annoy your parents is make sure you put the washing machine on for another wash. That is to get all the dye out of the system, so that next time your mum uses it or your dad uses it, it doesn't just dye all of your clothes, you know. But so these are examples of 2 different fabrics. I've dyed myself with Dylon dyes before. As you can see, you get a much stronger, bolder colour than well, actually, no, it's not too far off. That's my vegetable dye that I did against a Dylon fabric dye. This is a heavy denim, so you can see it's quite a heavy, thick fabric, and it's penetrated quite solidly throughout. Not particularly even in all places, like this sort of marbling pattern, faint marbling pattern, but nonetheless, I really liked it. And then this is a lighter cotton that I used for lining my garment at some point in my degree. Both used in Dylon dyes, and the other type of Dylon dye is a hand wash Dylon dye. So for that you just need gloves. It comes with all the instructions that you need, and then you just use a pot like this. I think it would be a cold dye bath. I haven't actually done one myself, so I can't tell you exactly, but it comes with all the instructions, and you can get really strong, vivid colours and a range of colours as well, which fix quite solidly.